Keith Smythe, Council Member for St Jude Ward.
John Smith, Councillor, Eastern Craneswater.
Lynn Stagg, Councillor for Baffins Ward.
My name's Kieran Laven and I'm one of the Council's planning solicitors.
We have the pleasure of your company. Who are you and what do you do?
My name's Lauren Atkins from the Mallins Group, and I am making a deputation today regarding 205 London Road, the first item on the agenda. It's nice to be here in person. I've done lots of these on screens lately.
Yeah, well, we're charmed by your presence. Thank you very much indeed. So here we go then. First of all, I'll return to the agenda. So we've done the introductions. Members, any apologies I've got so far? Councillor Chris Atwell, he's going to be a little bit late, about 1.5 hours he reckons. And also I'm informed Councillor Terry Norton will be here at about midday. Are there any other apologies? All right. Are there any declarations of members' interest? Okay, then we move to the minutes of the previous, which I'm terribly sorry, Karen, I've written all over. Anyway, those are the minutes. Are there any matters arising out of them, or everybody reasonably happy with them? Yes, good. They're always well written, so there we are. So I've approved the minutes. Can I have someone seconding them, if that's all right? Thank you, Gerald. You got in first, George. Okay, they're signed now, Karen. And Simon, are you leading on updates from the previous applications?
Yes and no. I am, but I'm afraid with staff illness and so on, we haven't managed to pull together, or at least I've missed it if it's been provided. So I'd like to provide that separately to members, if I may.
Yes, if you could email it around, that'd be lovely. All right, much obliged to you, thank you. So we move on to the planning applications then, which it's number 5 in your report, but so page 21 or page 3, depending on how you look at it, which is 205 London Road in Hilsey. Construction of a 3-storey extension to form 8 flats following the demolition of the existing extension. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so we're at 205 London Road up in Hilsey. Here is the site plan. It's an application to demolish an existing rear wing that you can see edged in red there, and to replace that with a slightly bigger rear wing development. The existing has 3 flats, each 2-bedroomed. The proposal is for 8 1-bedroomed flats. So London Road runs from the southwest to northeast there. This is on the northern edge of North End, I would say. We're changing up into Hilsey. So not far distant from North End Centre, and with a variety of shops and other facilities dotted along the main road there. And then London Avenue turns the corner, and this is the application site. There is the aerial view for you. I don't think you can see my cursor, but the corner building is an older Victorian building, and the extension runs to the rear parallel with London Avenue. Opposite a car dealership you can see on the southern corner there. That's the footprint of the building. So as I said, the original building is there on the corner in the L shape. You'll see that in a minute in the photograph, and the rear extension proposed runs to the rear along London Avenue. You can see at its western end there's a dotted line, so that is the footprint of the existing building. And the new building would extend, that's 3.2 metres further west. So it's not quite like for like, but it's pretty similar in footprint, just with that 3-metre extension further west. So it's a redevelopment, essentially. This is the new footprint. The existing vehicular access would be retained where the two car parking spaces are shown there. There's a separate driveway next to it to the left there, to the west, which runs to the backs of properties, and there's a commercial property, a storage building you can see just to the immediate north, which is a commercial storage building. So there is a bin store there you can see on the left hand side, and then the entrance to the flats beside it, and then leading up there's a semi-basement, semi-ground floor, and then 3 floors above. Basically it's 2 flats on each floor, so 2 flats times 4 stories. They're pretty much replicated in format, so you can see the single, the double bedroom I should say, separate bathroom and living rooms that look onto the street variously. So there's the repeat pattern. This is the lower ground floor, so the only distinction here is at the back right hand corner you can see bicycle storage there. We've got a condition on for full details of that to make sure it's appropriate. And then on the street frontage, these are semi-basement lower ground as the existing is. So these ones have got a private terrace, private in sort of ownership and access, but clearly right onto the street there. But it is, you know, nevertheless their area where they could sit out with a chair on a sunny day, south facing, should they wish to. And then the repeated pattern on the first and second floor. Here's the main elevation. It's fairly similar to the existing. Some amendments have been carried out, set out in the report, just to improve the overall design and composition. Fairly straightforward masonry, mansard roof, some detailing to the windows and so on, but a relatively straightforward and satisfactory composition there, in officer's opinion. That's the rear elevation. Now you can see dotted in red is the outline of the current one, so just to remind members, it's a pretty similar height and footprint replacement building. Fortunately, because it's a replacement, therefore the effect on the neighbours to the rear is not so different to currently. There is a slightly taller building and a slightly longer, but that affects the storage building, which is not residential, to the rear, and there are no objections on those grounds from those occupiers or indeed anyone else. Those rear windows are for frosted glazing. They're secondary windows and stairs and bathrooms. That's the end elevation, so that is the one that you would see if you're approaching from London Avenue heading towards London Road. So the street frontage is on the right hand side there. So that end elevation has been properly addressed with some windows there, extra windows to the living rooms. There at last is the photograph of the existing. So there's the original Victorian building, I think it's Victorian, on the right hand side, quite distinctive and attractive. And then the existing building to the left. As you can see, it's got the semi-basement, so it's 1 flat on each story there with a slightly smaller footprint and 2 bedrooms, as I say. I understand the quality, the construction quality of that building is not perfect either, which I think is part of the reason for the wish to replace it, because it's not that old, but that is one of the problems I understand. That's just slightly further around, so you've got the nearest neighbour there, separated by the access way you can just see, and then looking towards London Road. Another view there of the street with the property on the left hand side, the car dealership on the right, London Road, and some other flats further afield. And here we are looking at the end of the current development. You can't see the access there, hidden by the parked cars, and then the terraced housing to the west. There are no updates to the report, and we have the deputy here. Thank you.
Are we going to be referencing the change in the guidelines from National England about the nitrates thing?
We can do now or later, or
Okay, so you want to do it separately later on, not relating
perhaps
to
after this one. Yeah, because I don't think there's any. It's general to all residential applications.
Okay,
so, yeah.
fine. All right. Right. Where's she gone? Lauren.
Thank you. As I mentioned, my name's Lauren Atkins and I'm the Managing Director of the Malins Group. 205 London Road has been in my family's ownership for over 15 years. The scheme before you has developed over quite a lot of time and has been progressed through working closely with the local planning authority and its officers to arrive at the scheme we are presenting to you today. The initial proposal was submitted for pre-app feedback in December 2019. This was revised based on officers' comments and was submitted in May 20. Due to COVID, there have been significant delays, but in February 21, we spent time collaboratively working with the case officer to finalise the officer-supported design. The local authority does not have a 5-year housing supply, and due to the challenges faced over the last 2 years, the housing situation has got worse. The location lends itself to single occupants rather than families, and historically we have found that the original apartments are rarely rented by couples or families who prefer the 2 or 3 bed houses in the area. Our proposal raises the number of units from 3 2-beds for up to 12 people to 8 1-beds for up to 16 people. I am proposing to make changes now to secure the whole site for the long term. To retrofit the existing building would be complex and economically disproportionate to the overall benefits achievable. Initial consideration was given to retaining, adapting and extending the existing building as presented in the pre-app. However, a new building will significantly reduce carbon emissions associated with operational energy use, such as heat, water and electricity consumption, and will reduce the environmental impact of both the building and its occupants. The new building will also facilitate essential works to the period building on the corner. We are proposing secure refuse and recycling amenity managed by our agency. Soft landscaping and green roofs will increase biodiversity, and the large underground sump and green roof systems release storm water more slowly into the main system. The proposal allows for 18 cycle spaces and is located a short distance from the Paulsgrove to the hard, quieter cycle route. The site is well positioned to take advantage of the South East Hampshire rapid transport network. Car ownership will be dissuaded. The 2 existing off-street parking spaces are to be retained and allocated. However, historically, they have been rarely used as occupants typically use the bus service. All new units are to be car-free. We've worked closely with the case officer and local specialist consultants, Paul Basham Associates, to ensure the proposal will not negatively impact highway safety. As mentioned in the officer's report, the NPPF paragraph 111 is clear that development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, which there would not, or if the residential cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. To reiterate to your planning department, this does not outweigh the balance in favour of this development. So in summary, we have been proactive with the local authority. We comply with national and local policy. We provide additional and more suitable dwellings towards Portsmouth targets, are actively discouraging car use and promoting healthy living, reduce both the environmental impact of the site and the operational energy associated with the building's use. I trust you will agree that the scheme before you secures the future of the site, providing valuable extra housing units while promoting health and sustainable living, and will support your officer's view to grant approval. Many thanks for listening to me.
All right, Laura, thank you very much for that very detailed and informative and excellent deputation. Members, any questions? Councillor Smythe.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any room at all to plant a tree or have a small herbaceous border on the? If we go back to the site plan, I thought there might have been some room alongside the two-car parking space, or perhaps on the corner there. I would be keen to see something planted there because the whole area is a bit devoid of anything natural. Thank you.
Simon, there are trees up and down, large trees up and down London Road, of course, but is there any opportunity to do something like that Councillor Smythe is investigating?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it might be difficult, and I think the report is candid in that respect, but we have nevertheless got a condition on to explore it properly. It may be, for example, that as part of the two individual little terraced areas at the front, for example, to make that a bit more private, we could have a boundary wall with integral planter, for example, that, may benefit everyone, because there is limited space. But we have a condition, Councillor, so we shall look at it further with the applicant.
Yeah, anything to green it up. I mean, what they're proposing is really very good around that. But if you go up and down, for example, Kingston Road in front of our properties, on Kingston, you've got low-level planters, which are really very, very good, and full of all sorts of flowers all year around. Okay, any other questions, members? No, very good. So I'll move the officer's report. Sorry, I'm going to move the officer's report, and as we go into comments. Any comments, members? No comments. Can I get a seconder for the officer's report? Councillor Vergès. All right then. So I should put that to the vote. All those in agreement with the report and the conditions, that's unanimous. Thank you very much for coming, Lauren. Thank you for your time this morning. So swiftly on to then 39 Britainwood Road. Who's doing this one, Simon? Very good.
Thank you, Councillor. We did have a deputy. We've had a couple of 2 or 3 further arrivals. So, deputy and an A. Dowdswell. Not sure they're here, Chairman. And there's an update from the SMAT that I shall come back to in a moment, perhaps. Otherwise, I'll take you through the application to start with. 39 Britainwood Road.
So just confirm that Mr. Dowdswell does not appear to be here at the moment. Is that correct? Okay, carry on, Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. 39 Britainwood Road in Southsea, near Bransbury Park. Indeed, that's Bransbury Park Road, I think, there on the north, which the site backs onto. Sorry, it's not a great plan. This is a first-floor rear extension. You can see these properties are terraces of 4, with the bookend properties having slightly further extensions at the rear as built originally, which you can see there on the left-hand side, the existing relationship, so a 2-storey rear wing and further single-storey. So the proposal is to build that bedroom 4 on the right-hand side. Clearly, you can see it's been set off the boundary to the neighbour to the left, which is the east, obviously to reduce the impact. Not only is it set back, but then it's chamfered on that corner as well. You can see a rear-facing, which is north-facing window to that bedroom. That is the rear elevation, so existing on the left-hand side. Strange enough, there are no windows currently in the rear elevation. We think there would have been originally. And then on the right-hand side, there is the proposal being built up. You can make out the chamfer on its left-hand side, and there's the rear window. So we do have 5 objections: concerns about privacy, light, size of plot, and structural supporting the extension. But as the report sets out, given that setback, I think if I take it back to the previous slide, it perhaps shows it better. The impact on the neighbour to the left-hand side is from the existing bedroom 2, closer quarters, and by having the new bedroom set well back, officers feel, therefore, the impact would be significantly mitigated and within acceptable bounds. So that application is recommended for approval. In the SMAT, I'll just take you through. For completeness, the application was called in to committee by Councillor Winnington. I think he's not a councillor anymore from checking our website, but for completeness, it was called in by him in the event of a recommendation to approve. And then lastly, the rear-facing window is a bit closer to the gardens to the north, So the officer mentioned that that would be obscurely glazed. Indeed, that's what the application is. So for the avoidance of doubt, we're attaching a separate condition to make that abundantly clear for frosted glazing to that window. Thank you.
All right then, so no Mr Dowdswell. No, all right then. So members, any questions? No questions, any comments, member? I'll remove the officer's report. Secondly, by Councillor Vernon Jackson. All those in agreement, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. So 3 and 4 are off, if you've got them in your file, in your paperwork. So we go to number 5, which is on page 34 or 52.
Chair, sorry, I haven't picked up. Why are 3 and 4 off?
Simon.
Thank you, Councillor. Difficulties with the certificate, the accuracy of the certificate, which is fundamental. So we've withdrawn it from the agenda to make sure that is either corrected or properly understood, and it will come back in due course.
That's fine. It's just useful to know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So we're on to number 5 now, which is the parade tea rooms. And on the deputations list, I've got deputations, but it doesn't say whom. Have we got a deputation here for the parade tea rooms? No. All right. Just to be sure. Okay. Who's leading on this one?
Chair, do I need to declare that I enjoy their macaroni and cheese?
Well, along with lots of other people, I'm sure. Good for you. Good plug.
Okay, Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Simon.
Thank you. So the application is at the parade tea rooms on Western Parade on Southsea Common. So just to make sure everyone's located, that's Castle Road at just the northern end there. You can see that on the left-hand side plan there as it goes off to the northeast, and Southsea Common to the southwest there. And many people will know these were the former public toilets converted to a tea room a few years ago. You can see in the aerial photograph the parked cars all the way along there in chevrons, all the way along Western Parade, on both sides of the road actually, and the period properties on the opposite side, 4, 5, 6 stories tall I think, overlooking the common and indeed the application site. It's all in the conservation area, and the common of course is also a registered historic park. The park is also registered as or designated as open space, protected open space in the local plan. That washes over the whole common, so it would go up to the back of pavement in this instance. The application is for a single-storey front extension to extend to provide storage and freezer facilities. I'll come on to the floor plan in a moment, but just some more site photographs to make sure everyone is familiar with the site. So the first one on the left-hand side shows the southeastern corner. There is the converted building with the common mostly behind and beyond. On the right-hand side, upper photograph, that's another view of the front. The application detail point is on the right-hand side of the building. You can make out some planting there. That's a planter with a bush in it. That corner would be rounded off or infilled with the extension. We'll come back to that in more detail in a moment. Then some slightly longer views below, one from the Castle Road aspect to the north looking down, and then again from the street view, the last image past the chevrons, parking and the application site. So there in plan form, the hatched area is the site for the extension. That's an existing corner, as you can see on the right-hand side photograph. So underneath that bush is a planter, a raised planter, and just behind it you can just about make out a small plaque. That's a memorial plaque to a young person who unfortunately passed away, and so I believe the plaque combined with the planter is the in conjunction memorial to that young person. And then a couple of cycle hoops, 3 I think cycle hoops there, and then one of the holm or turkey oaks on the right hand side there. So the application is to infill that corner. It's 4.7 metres wide by 2.8 metres deep, and 2.9 high, I think, to match the existing front element on the left hand side there. cladding. We'll get an image up in a second. Well, I'll show you right now. There you are. So on the right-hand side, we've got the front elevation facing the road. So you've got a sign there, the relocated hoops and a door into the storage for recycling. And then the top elevation there is the north elevation. So that would be in a form of cladding with a sign there. If they need advertisement consent, they'll need to apply for that. The rest of the building is painted brick. And then there's the detailed plans. So the top right-hand corner is the existing site layout or layout of the building. So you can see the planter there and the bikes. And then the larger plan to the left shows the relocated bikes and the walk-in freezer, and in the extreme corner, the recycling store. So the purpose of the application is for more storage. The cafe seems to be performing well, and they just have a bit of a problem with storage, and this would reduce the number of deliveries from a stated 6 per week to 2. So it's about a business operating a bit more efficiently and happily in that respect. The plaque would be relocated elsewhere. The site is owned by the City Council, so those sorts of details are outside of planning but controlled by the Council separately. That's it. We have in the SMAT 2 additional representations received, which rather than reading out, we've got summarised here in your Supplementary Matters report. The same issues raised as already set out in the application. So they're already addressed in the report in front of you. So in essence, we've got a limited extension designed from the applicant's point of view to resolve a problem. It does mean a loss technically of open space, which is normally resisted, but we feel the loss is so limited here at the front corner and outweighed by the benefit of increased storage that we are able to recommend it positively to you.
All right, thank you. There's no deputations that I'm aware of. It's been referred here, I think, by a councillor or whatever. Was Councillor Symes referred it, did she?
Councillor Symes certainly raised an objection. I'm not sure about a calling.
All right, thank you. And it's here because of the weight of objections, I presume, and so on. All right, members, there's no deputations. Any questions? Councillor Vernon-Jackson?
Simon, could you go back to the photographs, if that's possible? No, you had a thought. Yeah, that one there. In the top left photograph, there is a high transit van, which is what they currently use as storage, much to the fury of local residents, because it's old and grotty and it's continuously there using a parking space. If we're going to give them permission to have storage, can we put in a condition that they remove that van and do not replace with a van that they use for storage on the roads?
Simon, what's the advice on that? And you may want to refer to Kieran as well.
Thank you, councillors. I have some doubt about that. Thank you, councillor. I think there is an enforcement file open, as you members may have noticed, because of some alleged non-compliance with some of the conditions from the original consent. I suspect that issue is already part of that complaint, but if it isn't already, I'll certainly add to it. I suspect that we cannot control the parking of a vehicle if this vehicle is parked there normally in terms of paying its permit or paying for the parking. I forget now what the regime is on this particular stretch. I have a feeling, unless it's parked there permanently and never moved.
It never moves.
Right.
It is just sat there growing moss.
I think the correct thing to do, councillor, thank you for the question, is to examine that further, if not already, in the enforcement complaint. I don't think we could attach a condition. It's not so extremely linked or within the planning remit to do that. So I think the enforcement is the correct route to go if there is a breach.
So
I think, Gerald, Gerald, if I may, this is kind of like the wrong place for it. So it's quite clear. I mean, this is on the road, this is on the highway. Is that correct? So any vehicle that is being used for business, which is on the road, is an obstruction. So it needs to be a different place. So this is obstructing the highway. So it ought to be referred to highways and.
So Lynn can have it towed tomorrow.
Unless we've given it permission. Councillor Smythe and Councillor Smith.
This is a further question about exactly the same thing. This is a further question about the same thing. It is an eyesore, that van there. I understand we could not put a condition on if it's not infringing local parking arrangements, but I do think we should be putting an advisory or a letter, a side letter to the applicant. I don't know if we're at the stage of moving on to comments yet, but
Sure. So this is not so much a question. We'll come to it when we come to comments.
no,
Is
it's
that
a
all right?
question about whether we could put an advisory note to the
we do that with anything,
planning
really.
commission.
All right.
I mean, I think it would make a difference in terms of public relations.
Sure. I think this has got to be done in a different place. Councillor Smith.
My question is really following on from the last two, which is if we pass this, if there was wanted an extra piece of space, why not park a van there and leave it there for a long time, and that will then start to make us think, well, we better give it the extra piece of space because in the hope that they might remove the van. It's a little bit of a worry that it can be deemed.
All right. So thank you very much indeed. We're considering a planning application this morning. It seems to me that this, from what the advice we've had so far, is that outside of our remit here this morning to deal with. We've got Kieran here. I mean, if the council has given that permission to be on the road with a parking permit, it makes things very difficult. Have you heard of this, Kieran, or not?
The debate from members has been understood and followed through well by officers so far. I agree that a condition is not the right way to go about controlling the use of the highway. That's a pretty basic point that comes up fairly frequently, to be honest. In terms of if it's an eyesore, you're talking in terms of potentially Section 215 amenity notice is something the planning department through the enforcement team can subsequently look at. And also I'd encourage members, if this is a piece of casework for you locally, speak to the highways team to look at whether or not it is paying for all the time it's there and things like that, and what the restrictions in any bylaws might be to have a vehicle that's permanently stationed somewhere moved on. But the advice is that no, you shouldn't be conditioning that today. Look at the application as you have it before you, and do ask if you have any other questions.
Yeah, it's quite clear to me there's a case, a really good opportunity for ward councillors to get involved and pursue this, but through highways and through the police and so on. I agree. I agree. It's not a good thing, but it seems we can't put a condition on when we're granting planning application about something else. So maybe if, as the leader says, that if we give them the storage facilities, perhaps they will remove that van, and I can understand people being absolutely fed up with it. Any more questions? No, we move to comments then. Councillor Stagg.
Sorry, I think this is a rhetorical question, but why are we considering giving planning permission to a place which is already not complying to its previous conditions? I mean, I don't know that this is a place to have an answer, but I think it's a question that needs to be raised, because if they're not doing what they've been asked to do before, why should we be considering something new?
Kieran's poised and ready, but it's each application on its own merits, and Kieran's going to give us some advice.
You need to approach it amorally. You can't come in with the attitude of if they can't be trusted previously, they can't be trusted now. That would be an improper use of your power. Yeah.
But if I was the owners there, because they got to this. Sorry, we'll come to comments in a minute. Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. I could also comment. Thank you, Councillor. The enforcement complaint into non-compliance with conditions is mostly around the delivery times in the morning. They're coming a bit early, I understand, a bit early than the designated hours, and the opening of the kitchen door. Both of those are separate, effectively, to the physical proposal in front of you. So I'd agree with the solicitor's comments. We can deal with those separately through the enforcement investigations and the current planning application for the kitchen door. Thank you.
Okay, so it's been noted in the minutes, Karen, that there'll be an investigation by enforcement if it's not already being done. And we also want, the planning committee also want highways to look at the van on the road. And we'd like a report back at the next planning meeting at the beginning to update us with what's happened about those two things. Councillor New.
It's just a comment, Chair, if we're moving into comments now. Yeah, I mean, I support the planning application on this, and I take the officers' advice that they've given. I know that historically there have obviously been problems, but I can't help but feel that there's been a bit of NIMBYism around sometimes not helping this business, and while I appreciate that there may be an investigation going, judging this application on what's before us today and some of the issues that have been raised by the committee, I can't help but feel that this is probably a good solution to hopefully getting rid of this van. So basing it just upon what's being presented for the storage area to be built, I would look to support this.
I beg your pardon, sorry, just missed you there. Councillor Smythe.
I echo what Councillor New has said here. I think on the face of it, it's something we should support, but I wouldn't like that ever to be construed as me being in favour of development on the common in any way. This is filling in a tiny corner. This is not a new big development. It's a tremendously popular tea room. It brings people down from, it supports tourism, it brings people down. It's in line with the spirit of the seafront master plan, which does seek to balance making the seafront attractive for visitors from within and outside the city with preserving this most tremendous asset that we have in South Sea for the use of the city and the wider area, which is the common. And I don't, I'd be the last person to support development of any major sort on the common, but this, I think, should, if anything, iron out some of the operational problems that have been, and I would like to propose that we follow the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Smith.
I take a slightly different view on that one, in as much as I think that I think from the outset they were told that when it was first planning went in, there was going to be no more space given, and now there's a little bit of creep. What happens once that's been done? Will there be extra creep on the front of the building? And the use of a van, I know it's in comments now, so the use of the van, you could put a van back and then say, well, we need more space, we've got the van there, we might take the van away, we might not. I know we've had advice on that, but I just worry about the creep onto the common, so take a slightly different view on that one.
All right, as far as I'm concerned, sorry, Councillor Van Jack.
So, personally, I think it's okay, but I would ask for an advisory because we were told that this building is owned by the City Council. So even though we might give a planning application where we can't put a condition on that van is removed and not replaced, we can do an advisory to the person making the decision about whether a licence is granted to allow this development to happen, that could be a condition of the licence, which would be an appropriate route to do it. So I would like to propose that we put an advisory on to the Property Department of Portsmouth City Council to say that we would like to suggest that there is a condition that would mean the removal of the current storage van and it's not being replaced by another van if they're going to go ahead and build this.
All right, I think the committee wants that. As far as I'm concerned, notwithstanding these issues, similarly to Councillor New, have you proposed it, Councillor New? Yeah, so I'm going to second it. Yeah, sorry, I got there before you. I beg your pardon. But Councillor Smythe can second it. I don't mind that. Councillor Smythe happily enjoy the members. But it's a good business, and you rightly mentioned the Seafront Master Plan. I mean, it is part of the Seafront Master Plan and the strategy to provide a lot of, there's a place for fish and chips and burgers and so on, absolutely right. But we wanted to bring in all these new eateries and so on, and this was one of them. And there was a lot of angst before we got there, but we eventually got there. As for the creep, they tried to do the creeping before to the front, and that was vetoed by the committee, so it's unlikely to happen again. This is a small infill of the building, a very small infill, and notwithstanding any other issues around non-compliance of conditions and so on, I do feel that we're the landlords and we have control in this matter, so the van being on the road ought to be something that the City Council can look at. We are the Highways Authority too, so there should be a resolution. So here we are, we're assisting the business by perhaps granting this permission today. We've got some issues that neighbours have raised which have really got to be looked at. So on those grounds, I'll move to the vote.
Councillor,
we'll have a report back later on.
Councillor, can I just, as a matter of housekeeping, sorry, it's me.
Kieran, I couldn't hear you. Sorry, Kieran.
So just to be clear, you had Councillor New proposing, you seconded, and that bundles up Councillor Vernon Jackson's request for an informative, which I trust the planning officer.
Yes, and I'm sure Councillor New agrees that.
Simon, you happy with the terms of the informative you're being asked to attach?
I think I've got the general idea, yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. If you want to proceed to the vote, Chair.
I'm at a bit of a disadvantage now. The damn thing isn't working again, so I'm struggling. And I may ask Chris Atwell to come up here, and I'm going to go home. I can't hear. There's no point me pretending I can hear what you're all saying, and I'm going to miss something in a minute. I'll give it another go in a minute, but we need a new loop, Karen. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about this. I'm not skiving off, I just simply can't hear everything and I'm struggling. So there we are. It's been proposed by Councillor New, seconded by myself, and we've got written into the minutes the issue about the highways and the van. We've noted the concerns of members about creep, but we don't think there will be. And what was the other thing we were going to do? Have a report back about the non-compliance with the
enforcement.
Yeah, and your missive is on there. All right, members, with all those things included, all those in favour of the planning application, please show. So that's unanimous. Members, I'm terribly sorry. I can't hear. We need a new hearing loop. I really do struggle otherwise. There's no point pretending. You can see me doing this business and lark. It looks quite stupid. And so I'm going to ask Councillor Atwell, who's arrived. Are you any declarations of interest, Councillor Atwell?
No, good morning, Chair. Committee's apologies for being late. No declarations of interest.
No, it's great to see you. Thank you very much. And I'm going to pass the chair to him. Is that all right? And can we just make sure that we get a new one? I don't know why it's not working. It just might be the batteries, a bit like me, I guess.
Hello. Rather unexpectedly, we have a new chair for the rest of the meeting. Good morning. Okay, next item. Fire Road. Are you presenting, Simon?
Thank you, Chairman. Mark here is the case officer, but I'll just take members through the SMAT, if I may, first briefly. This is an application from Class C3 dwelling house to either a Class C3 dwelling house or a Class C4 small HMO.
Simon, you couldn't talk a bit louder, could you? I'm old and deaf.
Apologies, Councillor. Is that better? Thank you. An application at 35 Offield Road for a change of use from Class 3 dwelling house to either a Class 3 dwelling house or a Class C4 small HMO. My colleague Mark Wadsworth will present it in a moment. I'll just take you through the further representations. In the SMAT in front of you, since publication of the report, we've had a further representation from a group named the residents of Shadwell, Oriel, Wadham and Offield Road, taking you through a number of points, the numbers of objections, the 50-metre radius is too small, monitoring, the number of HMOs, connections to licensing and documents already published, the need for soundproofing, for example, against a bathroom, wishing to have a review of the HMO policy, and we've also noted that a couple of one or more HMOs have been identified, we believe, by third parties within the 50-metre radius. We've double-checked. There are some flats. I think 5 properties have been converted to flats. You know, one house into 2 flats. They don't count as HMOs, of course, so that doesn't change the figures. And a couple of more recent consents are both outside the 50-metre radius. And then on page 4 of the SMAT, support from the same group, but on the condition that the occupancy is limited to 4 people. There's a comparison from the representation to the typical occupation they believe, or many occupations with perhaps just a couple of people in these homes compared to up to 6 people, say, for a Class C4. So the objection is, well, support if it were conditioned to 4, but otherwise the concern is about the scale of development and integration into the community. And overnight, Councillor Weems submitted some similar comments, which I shall have to read out to you as they came in overnight. Again, like what I've just read out to you briefly, concern about the level of objection, but still a recommendation to approve. Concern that the local plan isn't fit for purpose, not protecting Portsmouth homes. Concern about the scale, i.e. 6 bedrooms is too much. People coming and going and congested roads and parking. A reference to police visits for various unpleasant reasons for an existing HMO further on the road. Councillor Weems says he is not against landlords that provide a good standard and sized properties, nor does he defend tenants who take advantage of reputable landlords. He would just like a balance that he doesn't feel exists with this application. So the councillor does not believe HMOs are the issue, it is the scale of the development. That's a brief summary of what he's submitted. So I'll pass over to my colleague now.
Thank you, Simon. Can you next? Oh, right. Thank you. Yes, the site's on Orfeo Road. It's a large family terraced house. Next slide, please. This is a roadside view of the property. Next slide, please. This was taken more recently. It shows scaffolding on the outside of the building. So various works have, what our understanding, have been or are being carried out into, including the fitting out of the building and rear extension and a rear dormer. I'll go into that in a bit more detail. Next slide, please. So this is a view of the rear. So you can see the single story. Sorry about the quality of the photograph. It doesn't quite show the context, but it shows the recently constructed rear extension and the large dormer on the rear slope of the roof. So there was a prior approval for the rear extension, approved last year, and the rear dormer extension is permitted development. Next slide, please. Shows the existing floor plans. So if we look at the ground floor plan, you can see at the rear the existing, or it's no longer there actually, kitchen and conservatory. They've been demolished to make way for the rear extension. Draw your attention to the second floor plan. So there's an existing bedroom in the roof space, light provided by roof lights. Next slide, please. And this shows the proposed floor plan arrangements. So on the ground floor, that shows the the recently constructed rear extension. Internally, they're using the existing walls. At first floor level, there's been some remodelling with construction of partition walls to create the rooms, and then at second floor level, there are two rooms. So the rear dormer extension obviously provides the additional floor space. So the bedroom at the front at second floor level, they'll gain light through the Velux windows. Okay, next slide, please. This shows the at the rear. I draw your attention to the cycle store. So without properties along Orfield Road don't have a separate access to the rear gardens. That's not possible. So anybody who's looking to park their bicycle in the store will have to go through the ground floor of the property. Next slide, please. Our HMO count, as Simon mentioned, it doesn't flag up any HMOs within the 50-metre radius of the property, albeit there are 4 properties that have been subdivided into 2 flats. Next slide, please. And the floor space assessment. So we've assessed against the HMO SPD standards, and the rooms are within those standards. Next slide, please. And finally, just this drawing just shows the extensions which have been built out to enable this the rooms to be created. So just to reiterate, the dormer is permitted development, and the rear extension has been, we've looked at that through a prior approval process. So we've been through this an assessment of the proposals and looked at it, assessed them against the SPD HMO, and the proposals are compliant. So we're recommending approval subject to conditions which are in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Mr. Thorpe down as a deputy. He's not.
I don't think Mr. Thorpe has been able to come, and the written deputation that we've summarised in the SMAT that I read out was on behalf of that group, in part written. So I think that's the setup.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Questions?
This is just a question, Chair. Once again, we're charged with the need to review our SPD on HMOs, and I know the last 2 or 3 times that we've had applications almost identical to this one in this particular area of the city, we've also agreed that we will have a meeting of us and the Cabinet member responsible for regeneration and development to have a discussion about what might possibly be able to be done as part of the SPD, the new SPD and the local plan. Although I do think it's worth just reminding people again that we have quite stringent requirements, particularly the 50 metre squared, 10% of 50 metres squared. I wondered if we at some stage could have some update on the progress towards having that meeting, because it would be more comfortable for us sitting in here with applications like this if we could reassure the public that we are actually doing what we said we'd do, which is to have a meeting to look at these overall issues. I think that would be my question.
Simon?
Thank you. I think it may be one of those things where we perhaps need to nudge it along to make sure, someone is actually convening the meeting. So I'll happily provide that nudge along, Councillor, and get that discussion going.
I think it's quite important, and that's minuted as well.
Yeah.
And I don't have any other questions about this application. And with a heavy heart, if you want to move to comments, I'll propose.
Okay.
Accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Judith. So will you nudge today and let the committee know where we're? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
I wonder if we might do an informative back to Councillor Weems to set out what the legal powers we have are, and to suggest that he might wish to talk with his employer if he thinks those legal powers are not strong enough.
Can we add that?
To be clear, I didn't take the lead to mean we should put an informative on the planning permission. He's just saying we should have a quiet word with Councillor Weems about whatever it was you were alluding to there.
I think we should minute it.
You want it minuted?
Absolutely.
Sorry, and I didn't follow your drift.
So all I want to do is to do a note back to Councillor Weems to set out what the powers we have set out by government to be able to restrict HMOs, and suggest that if he thinks those are not strong enough, as he works for a Member of Parliament, he might talk to that Member of Parliament about getting us additional powers.
Are you asking me to convene a meeting with you and
No.
future?
I think if you're able to put a pen or a keyboard to finger to keyboard, that would work.
Okay.
Democratic,
also,
do you have a note of that?
Kieran and Councillor, through the chair, please. Otherwise, it will just inflict chaos.
Of course, Chair.
Okay, Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. Possibly to supplement that, Councillor, you may remember, I think it was 2 meetings ago when Mr Thorpe was last here, I suggested a meeting with Mr Thorpe, which is tomorrow, including Councillor Weems and 2 other local councillors. So that's perhaps to supplement what you've just asked for.
Okay. Comments? No comments? Councillor Fielding.
I was going to say, as we've done previously with other applications, I think if we're going to conditionally approve this, that we should limit the number of occupants of the building to up to 6 people only.
Which we have done before. Kieran?
Use class C4 is inherently limited to 6 people, so it doesn't require a condition like that. There'd be pointless repetition. Yeah.
So that's included already. Okay. Would you like to move?
With a slightly heavy heart, but understanding the rules and regulations, I would propose that we accepted the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Smith. To the vote. As proposed. For. Against. Abstentions. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, for the avoidance of any doubt, that passed 5 in favour, 1 against, 1 abstention.
Thank you, Kieran. We move on to land adjacent to James Callaghan Drive.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll perhaps do the SMAT very briefly, as it is simple. The time period planning condition number 1 is 1 year for residential developments, and that's been attached in error to this commercial proposal. So we would just like to amend that to the normal 3 years time period, condition number 1. But now if I get into and explain the development for you. So we're up on Portsdown Hill here, land adjacent to James Callaghan Drive. It's a planning application for the construction of a 2-storey research and development unit with associated landscaping, parking and hard standings. Just to locate all viewers and members, I'm afraid you can't see my cursor, I don't think, but you may just make out in the the left-hand third, Fort Southwick, Southwick, I'm not sure the pronunciation, with that, Southwick, thank you, with that blue dot. Just to the east of that, you can see a fairly large hard standing. That is the application site, effectively. That's James Callaghan Drive, running east-west along the top of Portsdown Hill. You can make out Paulsgrove just to the south. You can see the houses just appearing towards the bottom of the hill, and the chalk former quarry pit that faces the motorway and over the city. So, and then on the eastern side there of the development, some of the more modern listening station, etc., for the MOD. To the rear, the site slopes down into the Hampshire countryside. And before I forget, this site straddles the boundaries, as the report sets out, between Portsmouth and Winchester, which is put in a slight complication. Here's a more of a 3D image, so we've sort of flown down at a slight angle. That's to show the trees. So in the middle third, also on the left-hand side there, again, that's the hard standing, which is the application site. I'll just flip back to forward to the site plan. So the red edge is the whole application site. The more or less east-west straight line is the local authority boundary. So that's Portsmouth to the south, Winchester to the north. So the application has effectively been made to both councils, and each council naturally has to determine the development within its own administrative area. Fortunately, the application has placed the building entirely within Portsmouth's area. It makes it much easier than a building that, for example, straddles the two. So the development in the Winchester two-thirds is landscaping, effectively. Just to go back then for some context, so there is the large hard standing you've just seen, former buildings up on top of the hill there. You can see to the south there is a belt of trees, and along the western boundary between the site and the fort is scheduled ancient monument and listed building. And then to the rear you can also make out a line of trees as well, which are all there, or happen to give a degree of screening, summer or winter. I believe they're mostly deciduous, but nevertheless, even in winter, deciduous trees do provide some sort of screening and mitigation. In the south-east corner there, you can see the two lodge buildings that provide the vehicular access to the site from the highway, and so the access road would be used to go along to the west and up onto the application site. There is the site plan again. So in more detail, there's the local authority boundary again, the dashed line along the top of the site. There's the building tucked away in the northeast corner, so it's a 2-storey commercial building for light industrial processes. As it happens, the applicant is a local business who wishes to relocate from elsewhere in the north of the city, their own premises, and to provide the facility that they would like to in terms of modernisation, production space, beneficial for visitors. There's a lot of business that's international and reliant upon visitors, and so that's all part of the offer that this new facility would provide, along with about 25 full-time equivalent employees. So that's the building in the northeast corner. Opposite it, you can see a row of parking spaces. and then trees to the immediate south of that. That's a belt of sycamore trees, mostly sycamore, some ash. You can see that the first effective row of those trees would need to come out to allow for the parking to go in, but a good belt nevertheless would be retained. We can see those trees in more detail in a moment. The shaded areas on the northwestern corner as more planting, and then to the immediate west of the building is a service yard. There's the floor plan. The entrance to the building is in the southeast corner, and then you open out into a light industrial building, effectively, on the rest of the ground floor, essentially. Upstairs, 2 stairs and a lift, you get into more the staff accommodation, offices, and so on. The roof has a little access to, I think, what would be a roof terrace to make the best of the views, and those are photovoltaic panels illustrated on the other half of the south-facing part. There's the building elevationally for you. Some form of brown timber effect cladding. There's a condition to require full details of that in due course. Aluminium framed windows, brise soleil, that's the shades over the windows as it's south facing, just to make sure there's not too much solar gain, a bit of shadow for those windows, and a green wall, as you can see as well. The intention is with those muted, more natural colours to blend into the landscape as best as the building can. The southern elevation, sorry, the lower elevation is the east elevation. And then to the rear, we have a similar arrangement, horizontal emphasis for the windows, the fenestration, that's facing north across the Hampshire countryside. And then the western elevation below, that's the one facing across towards Fort Southwick. There's the lodge entrance buildings I mentioned earlier. That's the access point onto the main road. That's looking east from the access point and looking west. There's the belt of trees I mentioned a minute ago. So even with the on the right hand side, that the first row, if you like, coming out, there's still a good two rows behind it. We have no other arboricultural objections from our tree officer. And so the site is the hard standing to the right hand side, you can see there. You can just about make Fort Southwick out in the background there. Again, that's looking northwest across where the building would sit. That's on the western half of the site looking across to Fort Southwick, and you can make out some of the trees and vegetation I mentioned earlier. That's with your back to Fort Southwick looking east along the top of the hill. So you can see that the hill, I think, was in the past probably rounded off just a little bit to get a level foundation for the previous buildings. This is a view looking up to the application site from James Callaghan Drive. So there are the frontage trees again, and the building would sit a bit further behind. I think you wouldn't see too much of it there, given the angles and the lay of the land. Amongst other studies for ecology and heritage, there are a landscape analysis has been provided. So this is looking from the main road going down into Hampshire towards Southwick and Boar Hunt and so on, looking up across the landscape with the site highlighted on the left-hand side, and you can pick out some of the trees and the fort on the right-hand side. The conclusion is, in brief, of limited impact on the landscape due to the contours, the scale of the building, it's sitting into the slope and the trees. Here's another view, perhaps more familiar to members. This is from Port Solent. So again, you can see the chalk pit remnants, and then Fort Southwick on the left-hand side, which is outlined above it, and then the site behind the line of trees. You also see that going up the M27 heading west towards Southampton, if you take a glimpse. So there are various factors that are applicable that the report takes you through. I'll take you right back to the start, I think. With respect to ecology, those issues have been addressed. No concerns or objections from the various consultees. The same with Historic England and the heritage asset to the immediate west. And within the land within Winchester's boundary, which is the northern 2/3 or 3/4 of the site, the hard standing that we've seen before, that would be taken up and returned to grass downland. That is the application element that's with Winchester, and we understand that's due to be determined this week, and we understand that's likely to be positive. Predictably, perhaps because you're returning land that is sterile foundations at the moment to downland to increase the biodiversity in the area, lots of nature conservation sites around the site, and to improve the landscape as well. As it happens, Historic England also like the open aspect, reflecting the firing line, etc., from the fort. So serendipitously, the return to open grassland rather than trees is favoured by both those pairs of consultees. Various other technical matters with the application. There is an objection from the Highways Authority. Members may recall an application a year ago for a prior approval residential development further to the east that was refused by this authority. But again, there is a recognition of the difficulties of access to that site, not by car, but by pedestrian and cycles. It is difficult to get to. We can discuss that further should members wish, but members would have seen in the report the balance, as one would expect at the end, the benefits of a new purpose-built employment facility for a local company in an important scientific sector, the improvements to landscape and heritage and ecology I've mentioned, and no other harms at all attached to the development from officers' point of view. We feel those outweigh the concern of the Local Highways Authority with respect to accessibility. I think the last point, just to make sure, and that we have the applicant who has requested to make a deputation, and Mr. Codling is here today. Otherwise, I think I've probably given you enough as an overview to start with.
Thank you, Simon. Mr. Codling, over to you. 6 minutes to give your deputation.
Good morning, councillors. So I'm Sean Codling. I'm the Managing Director and owner of CTS Europe Limited. I'd like to speak in favour of our proposed development on the land adjacent to James Callaghan Drive. We're a local company based in Hilsey, and we've been looking for the opportunity to expand our business and add additional facility for the last 5 years. I live locally, and I intend to grow my business here in Portsmouth, where I grew up. We have been in business nearly 12 years, and we've become very well established within our industry. We design and build specialist enclosures that are used in pharmaceutical research laboratories for handling potent drugs. This is a market sector that is growing, and we have the opportunity to become a major influence in this market. We're an ISO accredited company with highly skilled staff and hold a number of industry awards, including the Queen's Award for Product Innovation. All of our products are designed and built here in Portsmouth. We keep our supply chain as local as we can, and wherever possible within the Portsmouth area. We export around 80% of our products and are recognised as specialists in our field. With our knowledge, we have the opportunity to expand our services and provide specialist training to hygienists and safety managers from major pharmaceutical companies all over the world. We specifically identified the Portsdown site as our new HQ in order to create a setting in which we can welcome international visitors and provide a workplace that our employees would enjoy. In addition to training, we aim to have a test laboratory, both to develop new technologies and to carry out testing of equipment for British and European standards associations. This will further enhance our technical lead in the laboratory safety market. I'm keen to grow my business and invest in a purchase in a facility rather than leasing. I feel that companies invest long term will provide better stability, better opportunities for staff, and keep income within the Portsmouth area. The site that we have purchased and want to develop is on top of Portsdown Hill and this area has long been established with technology. The proposed site is part of what used to be Aswi in the 70s, 80s and 90s. My father and my father-in-law both worked there, and for me this is a great opportunity to bring back part of this derelict site to life again. The site itself was demolished in 2010, left as bare foundations, and the site was not returned to its natural state. The site has been an eyesore with no aesthetic or environmental impact for 20 years. Currently, the site is in use as a lorry park and open storage for heavy plant equipment. Our proposed development application is comprehensive and has covered all the areas which we have been advised needed to be. We've received positive support pretty much all round, which is highly appreciated. However, there are comments from the Council's Highway Consultee which I would like to respond on. I noted from the Consultee documents that your consultant felt that the site was not sustainable due to the lack of safe, sustainable access for vulnerable road users. As quoted, this section of James Callaghan Drive does not form part of the bus network, nor is specific provision made for cyclists. Furthermore, the topography of the approach to the site is extremely challenging for cyclists, making this an unpractical travel option for all but the fittest. As a consequence, the accessibility for this site is very largely reliant on private cars, with very limited options for visitors or staff to make sustainable travel. I would disagree with the comments that they would relate to our proposed development. With regards to the bus network, I easily managed to get a bus from Southsea to Queen Alexandra Hospital, and from there a shuttle bus to the NHS car park and ride, where the driver was more than happy to drop me at the old bus stop at the site gates. I'm sure that if there were to be further development on the wider site, that a bus service would come back into effect. The infrastructure is already there, as it was in the 80s and 90s when several hundred people worked on the site. With regards to cyclists, this is a very popular cyclist route, and we have made provision for on-site cycle storage facilities for those that wish to cycle. With regards to visitors, all our visitors will travel by car or van due to the fact that they are travelling from outside the UK or carrying test equipment, as this is the nature of our work. In the 12 years that we have been operating, we have not had a single visitor that came via public transport to our Hillsey facility. In fact, the location of this new site is ideal for the type of business that we engage in, and the consultee did not take the business needs as a whole into account when reviewing our application. The plot in which we wish to develop is approximately 5 acres, with 3.5 acres as hard standing, and foundations and wasteland. We will be dealing with remediating a significant amount of potentially contaminated land and returning this to nature at our cost. Of the 5-acre site, we will be planning to build our facility and associated parking on approximately 1 acre of land and returning the remaining 4 acres to nature, bringing significant benefits to the local wildlife. This development is a very high specification, ecologically conscious development. It will enhance the aesthetic of the site and improve the boundary area near Fort Southwark, which is appreciated by Heritage England. This development is surely the best possible outcome for this derelict area, will help bring clean, high-tech business opportunities and jobs into the Portsmouth area for many years to come. I would appreciate your support in approving our plans, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Codlin. Members, questions? Councillor Stagg.
I don't know if I've missed it in the papers, but is there any mention of solar panels for energy use? Production, rather.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, solar panels are shown on the roof. All those rectangles on the left and half of the roof. It's not there, but they're shown. And the applicant is still subject to the condition requiring a suite. Sorry, we haven't applied that condition, but the applicant, we know, is keen in any event to meet all building regulations and exceed them where possible. So all the indications are positive.
Councillor Fielding.
I'm conscious of the row of trees that are going to be removed. Whilst there should be enough cover from the existing trees that are there, is there any plan to put back some of the trees that have been removed across the site elsewhere to increase sort of biodiversity and tree cover?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the shaded areas in the northwestern corner, there are two shaded areas either side of the access way that curves away there. Those are both for more tree planting, I think, than anything else. And then, as I said earlier, otherwise, the development in the Winchester, the majority of the site is mostly for chalk downland as opposed to trees, but I think the overall balance is clearly positive. The return of a large amount of sterile, as I said, foundations to positive grassland, chalk grassland with the rest of the wider area. So I'm not sure about the net balance of trees, but the net biodiversity and habitat balance is certainly positive.
Councillor Smythe.
To build on that question, leave that one up. Are there safeguards for that band of woodland, which is not it's not like a whole stand of oak trees or anything. It's trees that don't have necessarily a very long life. Would they have to be replaced? And is the possibility of planting one particularly down on the bottom west corner, said it is a double row of trees all the way through, and does that band of woodland, which is quite important for the setting of the building, need to be protected through a condition? Because woods don't last forever.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. It's not currently, it's not protected now or into the future, but we could address that by way of condition reasonably enough. And of course, we've got all sorts of protective, mitigatory conditions relating to construction. So that it would include tree protection of the remaining trees and a whole landscaping scheme, details of which to be approved. But should you wish to have an extra condition, that could be attached.
So it would be possible to put on an additional condition. I think, given the importance of that stand of trees to views both from the south and the north of this site, I would be wanting to propose that was done. Otherwise, I think it's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
I'll just say that I do like the scheme. It was just a question following on probably from the tree point, but I note the point about lighting, the lighting scheme. It was just, does that include commercial lighting as well, the signage at the outside, and how that's going to impact with the tree line and everything else?
Councillor, so if I understood you correctly, the lighting condition is principally prompted by the nature conservation concerns, but I think happily that will also address wider landscape concerns and views of the site in the evenings and so on. But the lighting will have to be done sensitively with respect to local ecology, bats, for example, and that in turn will serve to have an appropriate degree of lighting into the evenings just for the wider appearance of the hill. So I think that condition will pick it up. Just returning to the last point, if I may, about the tree protection. Condition 9 deals with tree protection for the retained trees. I think we could weave into that potentially the sort of measure that you're asking, Councillor. If not a separate condition, we'll see if we can weave some extra words into number 9.
Thank you. I'm sure that would suffice. The applicant.
Well, Councillor Smith, you want to come back?
It was just to say, does that include, didn't pick that up, does that include commercial signage, lighting?
I'm sorry, Councillor, I thought I had an answer to all your question. No, the applicant will, any signage, there is signage indicated on the building, naturally, limited impact up there, limited signage up on top northeast corner. It either doesn't need consent, depending on exactly what it is, its position, its scale, its illumination, and so on. If it does need advertisement consent, then we would be cognizant of the need to be careful with the strength or indeed time period of illumination.
Okay. Councillor Fielding?
I'm pleased to see the number of cycle storage facilities and also the provision that's being put in place relating to showering and changing facilities. One thing that hasn't been addressed in the parking is whether there be space for any electrical vehicle charging. I know it's a distance from the building, but whether that can be planned in. I think the way we're moving towards electrification of vehicles would make sense for the number of people that are going to be on site.
Yes. Simon?
Thank you, Councillor. It's a very good point. Again, I think we could weave that into the existing condition 16. Keep it as all one condition about that the condition 16 requires the proposed parking shown to be brought into use before the building is occupied, and I think we can happily weave into that requiring some degree of electric car parking stroke charging. Thank you.
Okay. Apologies, otherwise we get into conversations with people. Thank you. Any comments? George?
I'd just like to thank the applicant for the high quality of the application. I think the overall look of the building, the inclusion of green walls and solar panels shows that it's a sustainable development and is looking to go for the very good standard of the BREEAM rating. So, yeah, overall, very, very encouraging, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Indeed. Echo those comments.
And
Any?
I propose
You're proposing
approving with the condition.
There's a raft of hands. Judith. Councillor Smythe seconded. Okay, to the vote as proposed with the conditions weaved in around trees and electrical parking.
That's unanimous approval.
Thank you, Karen. Have your planning permission.
Thank you.
We move on. Queen's Road.
Oh, sorry, was this Matt? Was this you? Yeah, that was me. Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. 327 Queen's Road. This is an application for, like the previous Ophir Road, from Class C dwelling house into either Class 3 or Class 4 small HMO. 6 bedrooms. Before I forget it, there is a last SMAT entry, Supplementary Matters report, just noting there was a typo in para 512 where the extra living room the standard required was said to be 2.74. That's a typo. It's actually 11 square metres. So just for completeness, just to correct that typo. Otherwise, back to the application. Typical terrace street in the middle of Portsmouth there. There is the front of the property, subject to works already, as is often the case, as with the last application. I'll come back to those in a moment. There's the 50-metre radius and the HMO count. So about 5 or 6 properties to the west, I can see a different colour. That's an existing HMO. And as the report sets out, upon further investigation, we found a further one right in the southeast corner. It's that little diamond that's just shown outside the radius, but actually is within it, the property corner. So that is a second HMO. So plus the proposal takes us to the 4.28% set out in the report, which is below the 10% threshold. So in terms of your policy, the proposal is deemed to be compliant with respect to community balance. Onto the floor plans. As is common, we have a bedroom in the front there with an ensuite. All the bedrooms, I think, have en-suites. Moving through the property, in the middle there, we have an additional living room. And then moving into the back of the property, a communal WC and a kitchen diner. So the diner end is a prior approval extension that those works I showed you a moment ago are currently providing. Upstairs, 3 more bedrooms with en-suites, and then into the roof space, a rear dormer also been provided, this one as permitted development, to provide a second bedroom up there. All the rooms comply with your standards. In fact, they exceed the 10 square metre note, which means that although the kitchen diner is smaller than the 34 square metre standard, but because all the bedrooms are more than 10 metres.
Sorry, son. Sorry, would you mind popping your mic? Thank you.
The standard is reduced down to 22.5 and 25.18 square metres is provided, and the extra, or the living room in the middle of the property there, is effectively an extra in terms of accommodation provided. Some photographs of the site, bit scrubby, obviously, as it's being renovated and extended. The rear garden on the left there, the rear extension in the middle there, the ground floor front room on the right there, upstairs the front bedroom, bottom left looking to the rear, and again a third photograph there. Here's the rear elevation, that is the roof permitted development dormer, and then at ground floor on the left the flat roofed rear extension under prior approval permitted, which you can see both of those in that side elevation. With respect to deputations, we may have some deputies here. We've certainly got one, thank you. We've got registered Mr. Councillor Swan, Simon Hill, the agent, and Petr Markov, the objector. So we do have at least one deputy here today.
Thank you. Mr. Markov, 6 minutes.
Thank you, councillors. Obviously, you went through the plan and you've explained about the permitted development. That's the first point I wanted to touch on. As a normal citizen, I went on the Portsmouth City Council's website and I had a look on the provisions for household extensions, and I would like to argue with the fact stated that it is permitted development. It is actually, they haven't applied for prior approval as it's set out by the Portsmouth City Council website and legislation. Obviously, there are a few points mentioned in the actual report saying that prior approval is not needed, which I would like to argue with that. And given the fact that the developer hasn't applied for prior approval, hasn't followed the process as it is set out by the Portsmouth City Council, I think that's one of the main points it should be refused. The other reason why I think this is a strong point is the fact that we've had a look, well, I saw that you were discussing Offield Road today as well, and there was a property there where they went through the process of prior approval. For this particular property, we haven't had such case. So based on that, that's one of the reasons why what I want to put forward as reasons for objection. The second point, which is a quite strong point, is the fact related to noise and antisocial behaviour. Looking at the Portsmouth City Council's Housing Multiple Occupation HMO Supplementary Planning document from October 2019, it does say in point 1.9 that the complaints related to HMOs are 9 times higher than the non-HMO properties. And the next thing I wanted to touch on is the fact that from personal experience, I can back that up because I moved into the area of Queen's Road last year, and I moved from Southsea, which, as you're all aware, it's a heavily rented area, and we had a lot of issues with noise coming from HMOs. And one of the reasons I'm putting forward, not only on my behalf, but also on behalf of local residents, is the fact that we are against increase of noise levels and antisocial behaviour in our community. Another point in the actual report, which are points 516 and 529, suggests that there wouldn't be any significant increase in noise or use of the property, which I would have to disagree because of the fact that 3 to 6 different unrelated people who have different standards of living, different lifestyles, so they would use that house differently to what a family of 4, for example, would use. The next point I want to touch on is the light and privacy issues. From the proposed plan, obviously with the extension, given the size of the garden and the size of the extension, the proposed extension, that will cause a sense of enclosure and loss of light to adjoining properties. It would also look overly dominant for form of development, which we as residents are against of. The other point about light and privacy is obviously the dormer, which would cause a loss of light. It being given that these properties are north facing, the back of those properties are north facing, we have very little light coming through some part of the year, and it's much appreciated light that we will get in our properties, which if that's built, that would mean that we would use more electricity, and given with the current rise of prices, that can make a difference. The next point I want to touch on is, and I've put it in my formal objection as part of the application, is the impact on local services and infrastructure in the area. The first point is about sewage. Regular house in the area would consist of 1.5 bathrooms. The proposed suggests 6.5, which you would agree with me, I suppose, that that's a four-time increase in the amount of bathrooms and sewage coming out of that property. I've been looking at other applications, and off the road which came in earlier, there was a comment in the actual application that there were issues with sewage from an HMO property from that area as well. So based on that, I think that's a serious matter to be considered. Another impact is on doctors and local services. Kirkland Surgery, which is the closest, haven't been accepting patients for 9 months. Adding more residents in the area would not ease that problem. And the final point is the HMO and the impact of removing family houses in the area. I will have to argue with the radius of 50 meters, because that's not objective. For example, we have 2 properties just outside of the 50-meter radius, which are to be converted into HMOs as well, but they obviously wouldn't count. But they will impact us in any case because of their close proximity. The other point I wanted to make is about the fact that family housing has been removed from the market, where we have stories of developers pricing out normal families for houses. We've got a case on our road where a house had been sold to a developer who deliberately priced out a family who wanted to buy that house. So in that case, instead of us welcoming another family in the area, we would probably be sitting down in this room in a few months' time talking about HMOs again. So on that note, I wanted to say that on those grounds, I would like to pose my objection along with as a representation of the community in the area, and I would like also to support Councillor Swan in his call for a major review of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markov. Thank you for coming and giving your deputation and representing your community. Councillor Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. I'm here representing the residents of Copner, but also myself as a resident of the area. I'm quite sure at this point my objection to HMOs are well known, based as they are on yet more parking strain on the area, increased pressure on local services, noise and antisocial behaviour. And of course I renew these objections as they remain valid, but I also feel in this application there are further points which must be considered and are somewhat unique to this application and others in close vicinity. Close by there are 2 mechanic garages, one in Bosham Road, one on Copner Road, close to this property, both having numerous cars parked on surrounding roads. There's also a rather large care home at the Copner Road end of Queen's Road that when visiting people must park in the surrounding roads, they can't park on the property. We also have St Albans Church and the Church Hall, which is a particularly busy hub for local clubs and events, which again also contributes to parking on the surrounding roads. All of this impacts on the parking issue already stretched to bursting in the area. Whilst reviewing this application, it would be remiss not to raise issues residents have had with the ongoing development of the property, which has caused issues even before work is complete, with multiple residents experiencing intimidating behaviour from the contractors on site once their objections had been placed, potentially hazardous material being left in open rubble bags in the front court, and a very unsound, unsafe scaffolding being erected, although I do believe this has now been taken down, or in the process of being taken down, following intervention by the Health and Safety Executive. One really must wonder that if this is how residents are being treated now, then what will they have to endure if the property is managed in the same manner as it's being developed, and what recourse will residents have if there are antisocial behaviours or other issues once permission is granted, and what repercussions they will face should any issues need to be raised with the management of this property. This has to be a very real and very serious consideration. Many of the residents of Queen's Road and surrounding roads have lived in the area for many years, working hard to buy their homes, raise their families and enjoy the fantastic community feel of the area in which they choose to lay down their roots. These residents are the heart and soul of Copner, and the fact that I've spoken to 3 residents in the past month who are now looking to move, not just out of Copner, but out of the city altogether, is heartbreaking. How can this be acceptable that people are being forced to leave the area they love because of these developments? Although it is hard to argue that some HMOs are completed to an incredibly high standard and indeed are inhabited by professional people, this is not the situation in many, many cases. Mr. Chairman, my wife and I live very close to an existing HMO off of Powers Court Road, and the pervasive smell of marijuana is almost permanently in the air, meaning we are unable to use our garden anywhere near as much as we would like, as the smell is nauseating. We would look to take action, but following a serious assault on a resident who raised the exact same issue with an HMO in the very next road to us, we're afraid for our own personal safety if we do. And this is the problem. Residents are becoming prisoners to these developments, and when you can't use your own private space due to the action of others, it really is a terrible state of affairs. With the history of some other similar properties in the area, why should residents believe that this development will be any different? Mr. Chairman, it was raised at the last committee at which an HMO in Copner was heard that we cannot keep stopping and starting approval of HMOs. I absolutely understand that, but we have got to get this right, and the way to do this is to implement an even more stringent process for applications of HMOs. I know how this works. I fully expect you to bring up, for it to be brought up, what has gone before, perhaps what previous Conservative leaders have said or done, but I'm not a previous Conservative leader, and I cannot speak for things that happened before I was a member of this council. I am simply interested in the here and now and representing the residents of my ward who have approached me for help. This is what I was elected to do, and this is what I'm going to do. We cannot keep moving forward with a policy, whether inadvertent or not, and for the record, I do believe that it is inadvertent, that prioritises developers over residents and relegates them to a position where they do not have an equal say in how their communities grow and develop. I acknowledge the work that has been done to ensure that we have one of the most stringent policies in the country and the legal restraints we have, but I think there are still opportunities to tighten this policy further. Our cities and our communities are nothing without the people that brings them to life, and if even one person feels that they have to leave Portsmouth because they feel that their council doesn't have their best interests at heart or doesn't stand up for them anymore, then that should be a concern for each and every one of us. There are representatives from every political group here today, and though we differ in our philosophies and beliefs, one thing is for certain: we are united in our love for our city and the communities that each one of us puts so much effort and care into representing. Please listen to the residents of Copner, reject this application, and let's look at how we can make our HMO policy even better and set a standard whereby residents are once again elevated to their rightful position as our bosses and that other councils will be clambering to emulate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swan. We have the agent here as well, Mr. Hill. Mr. Hill, over to you. You have 6 minutes to give your deputation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I must explain this application is made and the property is owned by a private couple who are looking to provide quality accommodation for young people in this city. I represent them today. My business manages the process for the current investor, Mr. Wheelhouse. Personally, I've lived in this city since I was 10 years old. I've been involved in HMOs in this city since I bought my first one aged 21 in 2008. I worked for a letting agency and within the city, and I went on to complete a RICS accredited degree in property planning and development. I then owned a letting agency in central Southsea which won several awards, and also on London Road in North End, which I sold 3 years ago. We predominantly specialised in managing HMOs and enjoyed an incredible reputation for this. I'm a member of the Association of Residential Letting Agents and several other landlord and letting agency bodies. Indeed, I currently carry out consultation work for other letting agents on how to improve their HMOs and how best to manage them. All of our staff members are currently studying or are already qualified in their ALA exams. As a building business, we already employ over 50 local subcontractors who without these HMOs would not have employment with our business. As such, the conversion of this property provides direct benefits to other people within the local community. Portsmouth as a city has 62% of its population being working age, with an average age of between 30 and 35. There's been a year-on-year increase since the last statistics were available, which is 18 years ago. The works that we're carrying out are carried out under permitted development. What that means is that whether this were an HMO or whether it were a family home, the works could be carried out. So the dormer, which was mentioned by one of the other people who gave a deputation, if it were a family home, that would be permitted. It doesn't require planning permission. The only thing that we need permission for is for the building to be occupied by more than 2 unrelated persons. Portsmouth is currently one of the most densely populated cities in Europe, and it enjoys, thanks to many of you in the room, an incredible reputation for its employment opportunities for young persons. Sadly, as councillors will be aware, there is a massive undersupply of properties for the private rental sector, particularly for young people. Compared with other local cities, Portsmouth has traditionally an older stock of properties due to its history. Sadly, although there are currently 4,270 HMOs in the city, many of them, I agree, are not fit for purpose. They do not facilitate en-suites, and they are indeed not big enough to facilitate them. In our experience and opinion, the HMO market has changed, and people are looking for en-suite rooms. Our high-quality, well-managed HMOs will increase the standard of HMO accommodation through this city and will likely result in the improvement of the low-quality HMOs or for their return to the private rental sector for small family homes. We inspect the properties every single week and the communal areas are cleaned weekly. We check on the welfare of the tenants on a weekly basis. We have digital contact with the tenants 24 hours a day and they have a maintenance system to report any issues. Our last room let within 1 hour. We had over 30 disappointed applicants. I say this only to highlight the standard of our rooms and the need for them amongst the target audience. The location for this property has, in our experience, an undersupply of properties for occupation by young professionals. Indeed, this property was for sale for some time before being purchased from my client on the open market. There was ample opportunity for other people to purchase the property, and that didn't take place. The property was not in great condition when it was purchased. We're carrying out a full refurbishment, spending over £150,000 on the property, including, most importantly, brand new drainage to facilitate the removal of waste, as mentioned by one of the other persons. Many of our tenants are employed in local businesses and also within the NHS, both at QA and St Mary's Hospital. The benefit for the wider community of this property is often overlooked. If these people were not to live in an HMO room, they'd probably be in a one-bedroom apartment. Indeed, most of our tenants come from lower standard HMO rooms, which are non-en-suite, or from living on their own in a one-bed apartment. Particularly with the energy cap rise, this is prohibitively expensive. I rent a one-bedroom apartment for £1,000 a month, and including bills, it's about £1,700 a month at the moment without further rises. Our rooms are between £675 and £725 per month, including bills. If this property were are used as an HMO, that is likely to mean that there's 5 other properties which are available for rental by couples. Currently we're in talks with the local business regarding the installation of solar panels to make them more eco-friendly. We have tenants who are aspirational employed young persons, and all of our tenants are currently in full-time permanent employment. Recently we had one of the council licensing officers, Chris Andrews, visit a property, and he told us that in 16 years within the council our property was the most compliant and of the highest standard he has ever visited. Never have we ever had any examples of antisocial behaviour in any of our properties. Indeed, the tenants need our properties more than we need to fill the rooms. Prior approval, so with regards to prior approval, this property had an extension pre-1948, which means we are allowed to build off the back of that extension. So it does look bigger than some others, but it did have an extension prior to 1948. At the moment, with regards to parking, we have carried out development on 259 Queen's Road, which is about 126 metres away. In terms of the intimidation that was mentioned, that was myself who attended some of the properties of the people who had objected, not to intimidate them in any way, but to understand their genuine concerns and to try to work with them and to alleviate some of those concerns by offering them the opportunity to come and have a look at some of our current properties that we're developing in this road and the standard of accommodation. We have indeed carried out works free of charge for some of the neighbours of those properties, including damp works. There's over 350 properties in this road, so with the HMO numbers potentially there could be up to 35 HMOs, and as you've seen at the moment there's less than 4.8%. We have over 20,000 likes on various of our HMO videos, which shows the standard of the properties we have, and we do have a zero tolerance approach to drug taking. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Members, questions? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Well, I'm interested in the deputations, and I'm sure members of the committee share many of the concerns expressed by Mr. Markov and Councillor Swan. Badly managed HMOs cause significant trouble. I am conscious that there is a meeting which I think Councillor Swan has been invited to, happening tomorrow, Simon?
The meeting's tomorrow. It's with 3 other councillors.
Okay. But maybe we need to invite councillors from Copner as well to that. And that, as I understand it, through you, Mr. Chair, is to look at whether there are any additional powers and routes we could have to try to make sure that our policies are as strong as possible. Is that correct?
It was first and foremost to increase understanding between officers and Mr. Thorpe, a local resident who has been active in objecting. So it's first and foremost to increase understanding, but Mr. Thorpe also has a range of suggestions that have come in, and so we will look at those carefully and have first discussions about those as well.
Okay, I'm just wondering whether then, thinking this through, whether it might be a good idea to defer this until after that meeting's taken place, because the requests have been for us to try to make sure that the policies are as strong as possible, and whether that meeting produces any strengthening of policy or things that we could do differently that might meet the wishes and the requests of the deputies. I wonder whether that would be possible, Simon, or through you, Chair.
Thank you for your chair. I wouldn't recommend that. Thank you, Councillor. Not least as policy wouldn't change rapidly enough to merit or be reasonable in withholding a decision on this or any other application. There are many such applications. So I think my recommendation would be that policy may or may not change in due course, and so we have an application in front of us today that needs to be determined along with all the other ones. So I can take you through the other aspects of the application and so on, but that would be my advice at the moment, Councillor.
Thank you. Simon, let's check the mood of the room for a deferral.
Members, if you are entertaining deferral, I would advise that obviously the applicant has the option to appeal against non-determination, and you will be taken to the planning inspectorate with the policies as they stand at the time being. It's conjecture to say what policy might be in the future. You have your policies today, and it should be determined today.
Do you want to come back?
Thank you very much for the advice. I'll be very happy to propose a deferral then.
Councillor New?
Happy to second that. I think what Councillor Vernon Jackson said was very sensible. And Chair, if you'll just allow me to indulge for a moment, well, certainly for the last few meetings, as Councillor Vernon Jackson's alluded to, there clearly is a dissatisfaction with these policies. So if a deferral in the meeting can assist the committee going forward and indeed the council with the policies that we are looking to decide upon, I think that can only be a good thing for democracy.
So we have a proposal to defer. Simon?
Thank you. I'd just bring members' attention to the larger number of applications we have on the books already and other applications that will continue to come in, A, and B, as I say, policy, even if it were deemed necessary to change it, I think would take some time, depending on whether it's supplementary planning document guidance or whether it's the local plan. Of course, the local plan is proceeding, and that is probably the best place, and there are still opportunities for members to do that. The public consultation has been and gone, principally, but members may still contribute to that process, and we've been discussing that again with this committee today. I think there would be a concern because deferral for these other things to happen wouldn't just apply to this application, but to all the other applications for HMOs, I think. So there would be sort of wide-ranging consequences there, I think, that as Kieran said, you know, the policy is conjecture as to whether the policy may be changed.
Through you, Chair, to Simon. Oh, sorry. My understanding is we're meant to look at each application on its own merits. Therefore, if we defer this one, we're not saying we're going to defer everything. Therefore, I think you're saying my proposal is just for this application.
Kieran?
Councillor, you seem to be trying to premise your deferral on the basis that policy might change, but policy stands to be used today. It must be applied as it is today to the application you have in front of you. It's not, you're applying your local policies to the material considerations. So yes, you're looking at it on its own merits, but to say that you don't like your own policies is not a valid reason to defer an application. It's unreasonable. The council will get costs against it if appealed against.
Thank you, Chair. I don't need to get into a war of words with a solicitor in this committee. We've put forward a proposal, okay, and I've seconded it, okay, and therefore it should be moved forward through the Chair on that basis.
And okay, can you provide me with reasoning for that, please?
I don't need to.
Okay, let's hear everybody else that wants to speak. Judith.
I believe that this committee does look at these applications very closely. This one, in fact, is better than some that we receive because it's got a relatively large amount of communal space. I haven't asked my usual question yet about how bicycles get through to the back, which I'd like to ask. But meanwhile, I see absolutely no reason for deferring this. I think it would cause the officers a lot of difficulty, and we could easily have an appeal against non-determination, and the more we have that, the more difficult it'll be for us to get a better policy through in the fullness of time, where we can tighten up even further, given all the right consultation and link with the local plan and other things that we need that I proposed and had confirmation from Mr. Turner earlier during the day. So my question on the back of that was, how do they get the bicycles through the back, and where's the cycle story?
Thank you, Councillor. As per most properties in the island of Portsmouth, on the island part of Portsmouth, I should say, most of them, they don't have rear access, so whether it's a family dwelling house, which could remain, or a C4 HMO or a large HMO, it's taking them through the property in the normal way, which isn't ideal, but that's the reality for most properties in the city. So the bike would have to, or bikes would have to come through, and we have the standard condition requiring bike storage. So at least once they've got through to the back, it's secure and waterproof for that storage. Could I just return to two things, just on the point of correctness, I think earlier on I said that the rear extension was a prior approval consent. I've been corrected, it was a permitted development. It didn't need any sort of consent at all because of its scale and position. And lastly, sorry, Councillor New, to return to the point about policy and so on. Just to note, we've already determined an application earlier on in this today, 38 Ophir Road, for the same change of use from C4 to C3 to C3, C4 on existing policy.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, just to come back on that, I'm not suggesting that we would look to change policy to determine this, but there is clearly a problem, and I think that a deferral may help. That is all.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Question?
Just a completely different question. To the agent, this is down as an HMO with 6 bedrooms for 6 people. I wonder if the agent would accept a condition that it should only have 6 people in it, as I noticed that there is a room that if I was a nasty, suspicious and horrible person, somebody might think about converting into a bedroom, another bedroom at a later point.
Can I? So, thank you very much.
Well, hang on. Simon.
Thank you, Councillor. The application for C4 is up to 6 people, so it would be unlawful occupation. Yeah.
Okay. Comments? Well, we've got one proposal on the table.
We've got the proposal to defer and it's been seconded. I'd like to propose that we, again with a slightly heavy heart, accept this and go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Smythe. Seconded by Councillor Smith. So we have 2 proposals. Okay,
So the deferral will be voted on first.
Yeah. So would you mind taking... thank you. Just avoid any feedback. We vote on the proposal to defer the Vernon Jackson new proposal. All those in favour of deferring? Against? And I think no abstentions.
So the motion to defer fails, 2 votes in favour, 5 against.
Thank you, Kieran. So we move to the proposal to accept the officer's recommendations. Those for? Against? And abstain? I think the 4s are with a heavy heart.
Yes, so the planning permission is granted with 4 in favour, 2 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you.
Chair, I know
So-
we're very near the end, but could we have a 4 or 5 minute break,
yeah, absolutely.
please?
5-minute break. Okay, 5 minutes.
In which case, Chairman, my apologies for the last item. I'll need to go then if we're going to break.
Thank you. Are you here for the last?
Yes. Yeah. Apologies. Apologies for my absence. So I'm here. no declarations.
Karen, could we check that we've adjourned online? Thank you. Okay, members. As you were. It is just... Lynn, we're missing Lynn, yeah. Okay. Karen, if you don't mind. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Just for completeness, Councillor Norton has joined us, and any declarations of interest?
No declarations of interest. Apologies for my late arrival.
Good to see you. Okay, we move on to the last application, the QA Hospital. Simon?
I'll be presenting, Chairman.
Okay, please do.
This members will be familiar with this proposal. There was an outline consent granted last year, I think it was in July, and as part of the outline application, the means of access into the site was approved as a detail. Today, it is a reserved. What you have in front of you is a reserved matters application. So we are looking at the detailed design of the proposed new emergency department, scale, layout, and landscaping. It's worth pointing out that on the outline application there were parameter plans submitted with the proposal which covered many of those issues. So it's really quite limited today what we're looking at. Okay, next slide, please. So here's a bird's eye view of the existing car park, and I think it's quite a helpful photograph because it shows the relationship of the site in terms of its scale and massing to existing nearby development. So I'll draw your attention to the current emergency department, which is just to the north of the site, across from Britainwood Road. Okay, so next slide, please. So I've got a few photographs just showing the site in the context. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. The first photograph it shows the car park from. At the back of me is Southwick Hill Road, so that's looking westwards, I believe, towards. So you can see the cars parked in the middle of that photograph. Next slide, please. This is getting closer from Hunter Road, so you can see in the middle the existing the first floor of the existing car park, the deck car park. Next slide, please. Just to make a point on that previous, it also shows the topography and how the site falls away, and this one shows it much better. So, so at the top end, it's at ground floor. It's at first floor level, and then it steps down. So you've got some parking underneath there. Next slide, please. Another photograph showing it in relationship to the main hospital building. Next slide again. And yeah, that's looking northwards, and that's in the background. You can see the existing emergency department. Okay, next slide. This is the proposed ground floor plan. So it shows the arrangement of car parking. So there's going to be 216 car parking spaces re-provided, and these are going to be used exclusively by staff. You've got some plant at ground floor level, and to the west you have the building core, which provides access to the upper floors. So there's going to be a certain amount of excavation to allow this to happen. Next slide, please. This is where everything takes place. So you've got all the care facilities at this floor. Sort of the key is the sort of main adult care area is to the southern part of the floor plan, and the paediatrics to the north of it. I would draw councillors, members' attention to the at-grade access for the ambulance from Hunter Road. So that's going to be the main ambulance drop-off. There's another diagram I'll show you later, which covers this. But so you've got access, ambulances accessing at grade from Hunter Road, and then to the north you have the walk-in and drop-off area. Next slide, please. First floor level. So this includes a small amount of offices, welfare for staff, and there's some further plant. But I also draw your attention to the link bridge at this level, which provides access to across the main hospital. Sorry, I think I forgot to say that that's also the case at the first floor level. Next slide, please. And that's the roof plan. There will be photovoltaics installed at roof level. So we've suggested a condition as attached requiring further details on the layout and installation of the photovoltaics. Okay, next slide, please. These are the floor space for the development. You know, as you can see, level B is where the bulk of the care facilities are provided. Next slide, please. And I've included this diagram because it just it shows how the facility will be accessed. So just to reiterate, from the ambulance access from Hunter Road, with separate access to the adult care facilities and the paediatric care facilities, and to the north you have the main public access to this new facility with a drop-off area, pedestrian access, and entrances into the facility. Next slide, please. These are a few visualizations of the proposed new emergency department. This is from, well, it's a bird's eye view, so you wouldn't actually experience it from this angle, but this shows from the Hunter Road side, so it shows the ambulance drop-off and canopies around that entrance to the facility. Next slide. This is the more public face of the new emergency department. So you've got the pedestrian access, you have the vehicular drop-off, and because of the public-facing entrance, as this is a public entrance into the facility, there is some modest landscaping. You can see that on the edge of that image, and I think this is an interesting graphic because it shows the scale and massing of development, and you can see quite clearly that it is quite a relatively modest structure in comparison to some of the other structures within the campus. Next slide, please. And this is from Lister Road, so you can see the main facility, parking beneath the ambulance drop-off area at first floor level. And interestingly, this graphic shows the material, or gives an indication, a flavour of the materials selected for the development, which have been chosen to match in with the neighbouring main hospital, recently constructed PFI project, and in terms of facing materials and colours and palette. So that's very much supported, because it helps to pull the appearance of the hospital together and give it some coherence. Okay, and I think that's the end. Is it next slide, please? Yeah. Okay, thanks. So, in terms of the reserved matters, we officers are very supportive of the proposals. The materials selected, the palette of materials selected, we very much support the, albeit there are only limited landscaping opportunities. We support the general approach, particularly on that northern public entrance into the facility, yeah, we support the proposals and recommend approval, subject to the conditions listed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the agent with us, Mr. McFarland. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, Councillors. Good afternoon. My name is Mervyn McFarland. I'm a Planning Director at Turley, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to make this deputation on behalf of the applicant, Portsmouth Hospitals University NHS Trust. As Mr Woodworth reminded you, outline planning permission for the construction of the new emergency department was granted by this committee in July last year, and at that time I commented that a positive decision would give confidence for work to proceed immediately to develop a more detailed proposal for full planning approval, and that's what has happened, and that's the application that is before you today. The Trust, with its appointed design team, has continued to develop and refine the design of the proposed emergency department building, and is now seeking reserved matters approval for appearance, scale, layout and landscaping of the proposed building. The grant of reserved matters approval is one of many elements which is needed to achieve the business case support for the new emergency department, and to ensure the project is delivered as soon as possible for the benefit of the community it serves in Portsmouth and the wider area. A positive decision from the committee today will assist the early delivery of the project, with the start on site programmed for autumn this year, and an intention to have the new facility operational by 2024. The Trust has an ambitious vision of working together to drive excellence in care for its patients and its communities. Transformation of emergency care pathways is a key element of the Trust strategy, and the Trust has been awarded a £58 million capital investment for the new emergency care facility at QAH. This provides the opportunity to transform the way it delivers emergency care with modern, fit-for-purpose accommodation. As noted at outline application stage, the objective is to deliver safe, effective, efficient, timely and patient-centred emergency care. Again, as noted at outline stage, the current emergency department building is over 40 years old, is constrained in its size and layout, and has limited the way care is delivered, and has prevented implementation of best practice. Its physical condition does not provide a good enough experience for patients, visitors or staff. Patient demand exceeds by over 20% what the original building was built for, and this creates capacity issues which cannot be solved within the current estate. Currently, the emergency department treats over 132 patients each year, and patient demand is anticipated to grow by 2.5% each year over the next 15 years. The proposed new emergency department building will improve the physical environment, both for the benefit of patients through improved experience and clinical care outcomes, and for the Trust, ensuring an efficient and cost-effective department. This will contribute to a sustainable hospital estate that is fit for the future.
The proposal is fully described in the officer's report, as are all the reserve matters details, and I don't propose to repeat those. What the new emergency department will provide is the opportunity to implement best practice for patients needing urgent and emergency care. It will enhance patient safety and will mean trust medical and clinical staff will be able to work in a more streamlined way. This will enable faster decision making and prompter care, meaning people visiting the department will receive the treatment they need in a timely way. The design will see adults and children treated in single rooms, not only improving privacy and dignity, but also enabling any patients with symptoms of coronavirus or other conditions to be isolated quickly. Doubling resuscitation capacity from 4 adult bays to 8 will provide additional capacity for patients needing treatment for critical conditions, and 2 further paediatric resuscitation bays will be provided for children. A new CT scanner will be located within the ED, meaning patients requiring a specialist scan will be able to have one without leaving the department. The new building will be more energy efficient and will be easy to navigate for visitors. In developing the reserve matters proposals, key design drivers have included a strategy which enables clinical and support services to remain fully functional during the construction period, a master plan which enables efficient movement of blue light vehicles, a proposal which consolidates services into a building footprint and layout which supports a new clinical model, logical department planning with good adjacencies to the existing hospital estate, and an improved internal environment with increased daylight and connectivity to the external space. In terms of design and architecture, the proposed building has been designed to identify with the main PFI family of buildings on the hospital site. The use of similar materials will assist visual coherence and the establishment of an architectural identity within the hospital estate. There are variations in architectural treatment on each of the principal elevations, having regard to the function of the building and changes in levels across the site. Level B, which accommodates the treatment and clinical facilities, is the most public-facing element, and it is proposed to be clad in a mix of vertical coloured and terracotta panels. Green walls are also proposed to add visual interest, assist biodiversity, and screen some of the functional areas adjacent to the building. The new department will give the Trust the capacity it needs to meet the needs of local people, and crucially will enable teams to work more efficiently to give all patients the best possible care. As I say, a positive decision today will give confidence for work to progress immediately, and the intention is to start construction on site later this year and for the building to be operational in the second half of 2024. We're grateful for the officers' cooperation in bringing the application to committee today, and I would encourage you to support their recommendation and grant approval for the reserve matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McFarlane. Just for my own interest, how many people did you say use the ED per year? Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Members, questions? Councillor Fielding?
I was encouraged to hear, obviously, the plans for the development and also its sustainability in terms of the construction of the building. Solar panels to be used as a condition of the application, but as with the earlier application that we had on commercial grounds, is there going to be any electric vehicle charging in the staff car park of 216 spaces?
Thank you. Simon? Oh, sorry. So used to saying so.
I'm just looking at the outline consent, and I don't believe that's a requirement, but
can we encourage it?
I can assist if that's helpful.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
So because the car parking is underneath the emergency department building, there are issues in regard to fire safety with providing electric vehicle charging in an undercroft area beneath what is obviously a very sensitive use. So the intention is not to provide electric vehicle charging within that staff car park area, primarily, well, effectively for reasons of building safety and the risks that have been evaluated as part of that. It was looked at, but it was kind of ruled out as a design decision based on the risks it posed to the facility above.
Are they available in other parts of the site? There are lots of other car parking areas.
As if we're going okay.
My understanding is that they are and that they will be, though my remit is only this project. I know there are other projects ongoing where the intention is to provide.
I'm sure those comments have been heard and will be listened to. Any other questions, members? Comments? No. Councillor Fielding.
I propose that we vote for the...
Thank you. And seconded.
I think this is a long overdue improvement to a very important service, and I would like to second the motion. I think the designs look good, and yeah, long may it, quick as you can get going.
Indeed.
Be very
Indeed. Indeed. Thank you, Councillor Smythe. Okay, to the vote as proposed. 4. I think that's it.
That's unanimous approval.
Thank you, everyone. We have an extra thing, if members don't mind, waiting for a couple of minutes. Someone has an update about nitrates. Shouldn't take too long before you get back out into the sunshine.
Thank you, Chairman. We have a general nitrates update that I have a statement to read out for members. As members are aware, the Solent marine habitat sites contain a variety of sensitive habitats and species vulnerable to adverse effects of changes to nutrients within the sites. New residential development will create additional nutrients through wastewater and surface water runoff, contributing to these adverse effects. In order to remove these adverse effects, it is necessary to calculate the nutrient load through a nutrient budget methodology, allowing mitigation to be confidently applied to achieve robust nutrient neutrality as part of such new development. This methodology was previously provided for in Portsmouth within our own interim nutrient neutrality strategy, which has been approved by Natural England and tested through numerous habitat regulations assessments by Portsmouth City Council and Natural England, both on planning applications and appeals, and you've seen those on a number of applications over the last nearly 2 years. However, on 16th of March 2022, a week ago, Natural England updated their advice for development proposals, those proposals which have the potential to affect water quality, resulting in adverse nutrient impacts on the habitat sites. This new guidance included catchment-specific nutrient neutrality calculators and associated guidance. This new guidance and calculator reflects the best available scientific knowledge, and as such, with immediate effect, represents the only robust method to assess the likely significant effects on the Solent marine habitat sites. So, in a nutshell, we have a new nitrogen calculator with the best and latest guidance. The new calculator includes additional precautionary buffers and a further mitigation requirement in addition to that needed from wastewater arising from the development, accounting for the nitrates arising from the land uses. Overall, therefore, the total annual nitrogen load to mitigate required under the new methodology for all residential developments will increase. The general approach to mitigation, requiring a financial contribution towards the mitigation that the Council has already introduced, does not change, albeit each application is now likely to make a larger financial contribution as well, commensurate indeed with the larger nitrogen calculation under the new methodology. Officers are satisfied that this changing advice from Natural England does not change the recommendations or judgments contained in today's agenda. Indeed, the first item was the only residential development affected by nitrates, and that's why I didn't update you, because we didn't have any specific nitrogen total or financial sum set out in there. But that application will obviously, the legal agreement will be concluded in the light of the new guidance for nitrogen loading and costs. The relevant appropriate assessments, including the new nitrate calculator, will need to be updated and referred to Natural England as part of the process to satisfactorily complete the legal agreement to mitigate this impact on the SPA, Special Protection Areas, and this will be carried out where relevant as part of the work delegated to officers in today's agenda. So, simply put, updated methodology for calculating the amount of nitrogen to be mitigated, and that also, as part of other changes, will also affect the financial contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for the update. I think our business is done. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day.